I never thought a quiet summer away from home could change my entire sense of who I was. But that's exactly what happened when my parents decided to send me to stay with Aunt Lila. They said it was only for a few months, just long enough for them to handle some business overseas. But even as I packed my bags, I felt an odd uneasiness. Aunt Lila was my mother's older sister, a woman with a reputation for being stylish, sophisticated, and just a little eccentric. I remembered her visits when I was younger. Her dramatic hats, her perfectly painted nails, the way she seemed to glide rather than walk. She always carried a faint scent of lavender and mystery. As my parents drove away, leaving me on her doorstep with a single suitcase, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a world I didn't fully understand. The first thing I noticed about her house was how different it felt from my own. My parents' home was practical and plain, but Aunt Lila's world was a blend of old-world elegance and modern charm. Velvet curtains framed tall windows, soft lamps cast a warm glow across polished wooden floors, and the air carried the subtle fragrance of some expensive perfume I couldn't name. She greeted me with a hug that lingered just a little longer than expected, her eyes sparkling with a knowing look, as if she already had plans for me that I couldn't yet imagine. "You've grown so much," she said with a sly smile, brushing a strand of my hair back as if assessing me. "This summer will be good for you. A time for discovery." The way she said discovery made my stomach tighten. I told myself it was just her dramatic way of speaking, but something about her tone made it feel like more than a casual comment. Life in Aunt Lila's house began quietly enough. She insisted on a routine: morning walks in her rose garden, afternoon tea, and evenings spent reading or watching old films. Yet there were little things that didn't quite add up. For one, she was strangely attentive to my habits: what I ate, how I slept, how much water I drank. Every meal was carefully prepared, with herbal teas and small capsules she called vitamins waiting beside my plate. At first I didn't question it. She said they were for my health, to bring out my best self, and I figured my parents must have agreed to it. But after a week, I noticed subtle changes. My skin felt softer, my face looked clearer, and my emotions seemed to ride a strange wave. Moments of sharp intensity followed by a calm I couldn't explain. One evening, as we sat together in her cozy living room, I caught her watching me with an almost analytical gaze. "You're starting to glow," she said softly, setting her teacup down. "It's amazing what a little care can do. Don't you feel different?" I hesitated. "Maybe. Just a bit more sensitive, I guess." Her smile widened. "Good. Sensitivity is strength. Too many people spend their lives numbing themselves. You, my dear, are waking up." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Waking up to what? I wanted to ask, but something about the way she held my gaze kept me silent. Instead, she stood, her silk robe whispering against the floor, and walked to a tall wardrobe in the corner of the room. She opened it with deliberate grace, revealing rows of neatly arranged boxes, fabrics, and, most strikingly, an array of beautiful dresses. Soft pastels, bold jewel tones, delicate lace, and flowing silks filled the wardrobe like a hidden treasure. I couldn't help but stare. "Those are amazing," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're more than clothes," she replied, her eyes gleaming. "They're possibilities. Each one tells a story. Each one transforms the person who wears it. Would you like to try one? Just to feel the fabric, nothing more." Froze. The idea sent a confusing swirl of emotions through me. Curiosity, excitement, and a nervousness I couldn't quite name. I told myself it was harmless. Just fabric, just an experiment. Slowly, almost against my own will, I nodded. Aunt Lila's smile softened, as though she had been waiting for this very moment. She carefully selected a simple, elegant dress, a soft lavender color that matched the subtle perfume in the air. As she handed it to me, I felt the cool silk against my fingertips, and a strange warmth spread through my chest. "There's no need to rush," she said gently. "Transformation begins with a single choice. Tonight we start with curiosity." I took the dress to the guest room, my heart racing. Closing the door behind me, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, holding the garment up against my body. It was beautiful, delicate, and undeniably meant for someone other than the person I had always thought I was. Yet as I slipped it over my head, the fabric flowing like water across my skin, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling silly or embarrassed, I felt right. The softness against my arms, the gentle way it draped over my frame. It was as though the dress understood something about me that I had never dared to admit. When I finally stepped back into the living room, Aunt Lila's eyes lit up with quiet satisfaction. She didn't laugh or tease. Instead, she studied me with a kind of reverence, as if she were seeing the real me for the first time. "Beautiful," she whispered. "Do you feel it? The freedom?" I opened my mouth to respond but found no words. There was only a deep, unsettling awareness that something inside me had shifted. I wasn't sure whether to be thrilled or terrified. That night, as I lay awake, the scent of lavender still clinging to my skin, I couldn't stop replaying the moment in the mirror. The way the dress had seemed to belong to me. The way Aunt Lila's eyes had sparkled with something more than mere approval. The pills, the compliments, the dresses. It was all starting to feel like a plan, carefully woven around me. And for the first time, I wondered if this summer wasn't just about visiting family at all, but about something far more deliberate. I tried to tell myself it was only in my head, that Aunt Lila was just being her dramatic, stylish self. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered that this was only the beginning. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the lace curtains of my room, carrying with it the faint perfume of roses from the garden below. I awoke with a strange sense of anticipation, my heart already beating faster than usual. The memory of the lavender dress lingered like a dream I couldn't shake. I thought I would feel embarrassed or regretful, but instead I felt an almost magnetic pull, as though the soft fabric had left an invisible thread tied around my soul. When I stepped into the kitchen, Aunt Lila was already there, dressed in a flowing cream blouse and pearl earrings that caught the morning light. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, and a small, knowing smile curved her lips. "Good morning, my dear," she said warmly. "How did you sleep? Any interesting dreams?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I slept fine," I said, though my voice betrayed a hint of nervous excitement. She placed a porcelain cup of tea in front of me, steam curling upward in delicate spirals. Beside it sat the familiar small capsule, her vitamin. I stared at it longer than usual, the memory of her words echoing in my mind. Waking up, "I thought about the dress," I admitted quietly. "It was different, but not in a bad way." Her eyes sparkled, pleased by my honesty. "That's wonderful. Clothing is language, you know. It speaks to parts of ourselves that words can't reach. Sometimes it reveals what we've hidden, even from ourselves." I sipped the tea, its calming flavor grounding me as I swallowed the capsule. I wanted to ask her outright what was inside, why she was so intent on these vitamins, but something in her calm, steady presence made me hold back. Instead, she suggested a walk in the garden. The morning air was cool and fragrant, and the roses glistened with dew. As we walked among the flowers, Aunt Lila spoke softly about change. How seasons shift, how petals open slowly, how beauty takes time to reveal itself. Her words felt layered, carrying a meaning beyond gardening. "You know," she said, pausing by a cluster of pale pink blooms, "growth often begins with small, unseen changes. A seed doesn't announce when it's sprouting. It just becomes." I nodded, unsure whether we were still talking about flowers. Over the next several days, her guidance became more deliberate. She began to introduce me to small routines, skincare rituals, posture exercises, breathing techniques, always framed as self-care, but each one gently encouraging a softer, more graceful way of moving through the world. At first, I resisted in small ways, laughing off her insistence on moisturizing or practicing a slower, lighter step. But the more I followed her instructions, the more natural it began to feel. My skin grew smoother, my voice unconsciously softened when we spoke in the quiet evenings, and I started to notice subtle shifts in the way I carried myself. Then came the clothes. After dinner one night, she invited me back to the wardrobe, her eyes shimmering with quiet excitement. Just for fun, she said. Let's see which color's cold to you. She laid out a selection that ranged from soft pastels to deep, dramatic shades. My hand hovered over a pale blush blouse, the fabric as light as a whisper. Before I could second-guess myself, I picked it up. Lovely choice, she said approvingly. It matches the glow in your cheeks. As I slipped it on, I expected to feel awkward, but instead a strange calm settled over me. The fabric rested gently against my shoulders, almost as if it were meant to be there. Aunt Lila adjusted the collar with delicate fingers, her touch careful and reassuring. There, she said softly. Look at you. I turned to the mirror. The person staring back still looked like me, but there was a subtle shift, something about the way the blouse softened the lines of my frame, the way my eyes seemed brighter. It wasn't just appearance. It was as though a hidden part of me had been invited to step forward. You see, she murmured. Clothing doesn't change who you are. It allows you to show who you are. That's all this is about, allowing yourself to be seen. Her words lodged deep inside me, unsettling yet comforting. Was this really about self-expression, or was there something more she wasn't saying? I wanted to ask, but instead I found myself smiling faintly, tracing the delicate buttons of the blouse with my fingertips. The next few days blurred into a gentle rhythm. Each morning brought new vitamins, new exercises, and subtle encouragements to explore different fabrics and styles. Aunt Lila never pushed, never demanded. She simply offered choices, each one slightly bolder than the last. A soft scarf here, a touch of lip balm there, always accompanied by quiet affirmations about confidence and authenticity. Yet beneath the calm surface, I felt a growing tension. Part of me reveled in the transformation, in the way each small change made the world feel richer and more vivid. But another part whispered warnings. This isn't just summer fun. Something is happening to you. One evening, as we sat in the living room bathed in the golden light of a setting sun, Aunt Lila handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. My heart skipped as I untied the ribbon. Inside lay a delicate necklace, a simple silver chain with a tiny charm shaped like a rosebud. For you, she said softly. A reminder that you're blooming, even if you can't see every petal yet. I held the necklace in my palm, its cool weight grounding me. Why are you doing all this for me? I asked finally, my voice barely more than a whisper. She leaned back, her eyes thoughtful. Because I see something in you, she said. A light you've been taught to hide. You deserve to know every part of yourself, not just the parts the world expects. Her words struck me like a quiet thunderclap. I wanted to protest, to claim I already knew who I was. But deep down, I couldn't deny that something inside me was stirring, something that felt both terrifying and undeniably true. That night, as I lay in bed with the necklace resting against my chest, I realized I was no longer just visiting Aunt Lila. I was walking a path she had carefully laid before me, each step leading deeper into a world I had never imagined but somehow couldn't resist. And though I told myself I could stop at any time, a quiet certainty whispered through the darkness. I had already taken the first real steps toward becoming someone entirely new. Morning arrived with a soft patter of rain against the window, a gentle rhythm that seemed to echo the quiet changes unfolding inside me. I sat at the small vanity Aunt Lila had placed in my room, tracing the edge of the silver rosebud necklace she had given me. The mirror reflected a face I recognized but no longer fully claimed as my own. My skin carried a new softness, my hair framed my features with a subtle elegance, and my eyes, once plain and restless, now seemed to hold a depth I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't dramatic, not something anyone else would immediately see, but to me the difference was unmistakable. Aunt Lila entered without knocking, carrying a tray of tea and the familiar small capsule. Her presence always filled the room like a gentle perfume, calming yet undeniably purposeful. She set the tray down and looked at me with quiet pride. "You're radiant today," she said softly. "Rain makes everything bloom if you let it." I managed a nervous smile. "You keep saying that. Bloom. Like I'm some kind of flower." Her eyes sparkled. "Aren't we all?" We spend so much of our lives wrapped in shells, pretending to be seeds. But when the time is right, we open. You, my dear, are opening. I took the tea, the warmth of the cup steadying my trembling hands. The capsule glinted on the saucer, small and harmless looking. For the first time I hesitated. These vitamins, I said carefully. They're safe, right? You've never told me exactly what they are. She tilted her head, her expression patient. They're natural supplements. Nothing harmful. They simply help your body find balance. But if you'd rather not take them, you don't have to. This is your journey. Her words disarmed me. If it were some kind of trap, wouldn't she insist? Yet the thought of skipping it filled me with an inexplicable anxiety, as though I'd be interrupting a process I didn't fully understand but had already begun to crave. Slowly, I swallowed the capsule, the taste of lavender tea masking its faint bitterness. Later that day, Aunt Lila suggested we explore the attic. It's where I keep the real treasures, she said with a mischievous smile. The attic smelled faintly of cedar and old memories, boxes stacked neatly along the walls. She opened one after another, revealing vintage hats, delicate gloves, and elegant dresses from decades past. Each piece seemed to carry a story, a whisper of the lives that had once touched them. Try this, she said, holding up a soft ivory dress with lace sleeves. It belonged to your grandmother. She wore it when she first fell in love. I reached for it cautiously, the fabric cool against my fingertips. As I slipped it over my head, a strange warmth spread through me, a mix of nostalgia and something more. The dress fit almost perfectly, the lace brushing my arms like a memory I had never lived. Aunt Lila stepped back, her eyes shining. Exquisite, she murmured. It's as though it was waiting for you. I turned to the dusty attic mirror, my breath catching. The person reflected there looked complete in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just the dress. It was the way it revealed a softness in my posture, a quiet strength in my eyes. For a fleeting moment, I felt entirely myself, and yet entirely new. Do you feel it? Aunt Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The harmony. I nodded, unable to find words. The sensation was intoxicating, a delicate balance of comfort and revelation. From that day forward, the attic became our private sanctuary. Each visit brought a new garment, a new story, a new layer of transformation. Some days it was a simple blouse, other days a flowing skirt or a pair of elegant shoes. Aunt Lila never forced anything. She simply guided, offering subtle encouragements and gentle affirmations. You're discovering the language of texture, she would say as she adjusted a sleeve or smoothed a hem. Every fabric carries a message. Silk teaches grace. Cotton teaches honesty. Lace teaches courage. I began to look forward to our sessions, the quiet intimacy of choosing fabrics and colors, the way each new outfit seemed to unlock a different part of myself. Yet beneath the growing comfort lay a persistent unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than simple self-expression. There was a plan here, something Aunt Lila wasn't fully revealing. One evening, as we descended from the attic, I finally asked, "Why me? Why are you doing this for me?" She paused at the bottom of the stairs, her face illuminated by the warm glow of the hallway lamp. "Because I see what you can become," she said gently. "The world is full of people who never meet their true selves. I won't let that happen to you. You deserve to know every possibility inside you." Her words were both comforting and unsettling. I wanted to believe her, to trust that this was all about self-discovery. But another part of me, the cautious, logical part, couldn't ignore the sense of careful orchestration, the way every step seemed planned to draw me deeper. The changes in my reflection became impossible to ignore. My hair had grown softer, falling into a shape that framed my face in a way I hadn't noticed before. My features seemed subtly refined, my voice carrying a gentler cadence when I spoke. Friends back home sent occasional messages, but I found myself hesitating to reply. What would I even say? How could I explain the quiet transformation unfolding in a house filled with roses, silk, and whispered promises of becoming? One night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the living room where Aunt Lila sat reading by the fire. She looked up, her eyes warm and patient. Without a word, she set aside her book and patted the seat beside her. "You're afraid," she said softly. I swallowed hard. "I don't know what's happening to me." She took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "You are discovering the strength to choose who you are. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less. But choice requires courage. Are you brave enough to see where this path leads?" I wanted to answer, but the words tangled in my throat. The truth was, I didn't know. All I knew was that the path she offered was both terrifying and irresistible, a journey that felt less like an invitation and more like destiny. As the rain tapped gently against the windows and the fire cast flickering shadows across the room, I realized I had already stepped too far to turn back. The question was no longer whether I would continue, but how far I was willing to let Aunt Lila's quiet plan carry me. Days passed like pages in a book I could not stop reading, each one carrying me deeper into Aunt Lila's world. The routines that had once seemed strange, morning teas, careful skincare, the soft capsule she offered, now felt almost natural, as if they had always belonged to my life. Even my thoughts began to shift in subtle ways. Where once I might have worried about what others would think, I now found myself wondering what new color, what new fabric might express the way I felt inside. One evening, a soft golden sunset filled the house with a warmth that felt almost otherworldly. Aunt Lila invited me into the garden where roses climbed the trellises like silent witnesses to our conversations. She handed me a small basket of petals to scatter along the path, a ritual she said brought clarity of heart. As we walked, she spoke in her usual calm, measured tone. "Change is not a single leap," she said, releasing a handful of petals into the breeze. "It's a series of gentle steps. Each choice you've made, every fabric you've worn, every word you've dared to speak, has brought you closer to the person you're meant to be." I let the petals fall through my fingers, watching them float across the garden stones. "But what if the person I'm meant to be isn't who I thought?" Her eyes softened. "Then you've discovered truth. And truth is never something to fear." Later that night, she invited me to the attic for what she called a final unveiling. My heart pounded as I followed her up the narrow staircase, the familiar scent of cedar and rose filling the air. The attic seemed transformed, as though it too had been preparing for this moment. A single dress waited in the center of the room, draped across a vintage mannequin. It was unlike anything I had worn before, an elegant midnight blue gown with delicate silver stitching that shimmered like starlight. The fabric flowed like water, graceful yet strong, every detail speaking of quiet power. "This," Aunt Lila said, her voice barely more than a whisper, "is the dress that reveals who you have become. Not who I want you to be. Who you are." I stepped closer, my breath catching. The dress seemed to hum with possibility. My fingers trembled as I reached out to touch the cool fabric. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to know," she interrupted gently. "You only have to feel." I closed my eyes and let the weight of the moment settle over me. I thought of the summer days spent in quiet transformation, of the soft pills that brought a strange serenity, of the countless mirrors that had shown me not just a changing appearance but a growing certainty. Each memory formed a pattern, a mosaic of choices that led to this single decision. Slowly I slipped into the gown. The fabric embraced me like a second skin, its weight both grounding and liberating. When I turned toward the attic mirror, I barely recognized the reflection staring back. The person there stood tall, shoulders relaxed, eyes alive with a confidence I had never seen before. It wasn't just the dress. It was the quiet strength it revealed, the unspoken truth it allowed me to claim. Aunt Lila stepped beside me, her reflection glowing in the dim attic light. She didn't smile with triumph or satisfaction. Instead, she simply nodded, her eyes bright with something almost like tears. "Do you see it now?" she asked softly. "The person who was always waiting inside you." My voice shook as I whispered, "Yes." We stood together in silence, the air heavy with understanding. The journey had not been about disguises or pretending. It had been about uncovering a truth I had hidden even from myself. The dresses, the rituals, even the mysterious capsules, all had been tools, gentle nudges toward a self I had long buried under expectation and fear. When we finally descended from the attic, the house felt different, alive with a quiet electricity. I carried the gown carefully, not as a costume but as a piece of myself. Aunt Lila brewed tea as she always did, but tonight there was no capsule waiting on the saucer. Instead, she set the cup before me and said, "From this day forward, every choice is yours alone. The guidance is done. The rest belongs to you." Her words settled over me like a soft blanket. For the first time all summer, I felt no uncertainty, no anxious flutter in my chest, only clarity. Later, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The necklace rested lightly against my collarbone, the silver rosebud catching the faint glow of the lamp. I touched it gently, feeling its coolness beneath my fingertips. The person staring back was neither the old version of me nor a stranger. They were simply me, whole, awake, and unafraid. That night, I slept deeply, dreams filled not with confusion but with an open sky and endless possibility. The path ahead was still unwritten, but for the first time I felt ready to walk it, step by deliberate step, carrying with me the quiet strength Aunt Lila had helped me discover. The final weeks of my stay passed with a strange, dreamlike clarity. Each morning I woke to the gentle scent of roses drifting through the curtains. Each evening I sat with Aunt Lila over tea as the house settled into its quiet twilight. Yet beneath the familiar routines, something had shifted. The mirror no longer startled me. Where I once searched for proof of who I was, I now found a calm recognition, a quiet acceptance of the person taking shape before my eyes. Aunt Lila noticed too. She no longer offered the small capsules or guided my steps through careful routines. Instead, she let me move at my own pace, watching with a faint smile of someone who knows the work is complete. One morning as we tended the garden, she handed me a pair of pruning shears and said simply, "The rest is yours now." I clipped the roses in silence, the crisp snap of the stems echoing in the warm air. There was no need for explanation. Her words were not about flowers. They were about the choices I would carry into the world beyond her gates. As my departure approached, letters from my parents began to arrive with more regularity. They spoke of return flights, of plans to meet at the airport, of how excited they were to see me again. I read their words with a curious detachment. I loved them, of course, but I wondered how they would react when they saw me. Not because I had become someone entirely different, but because I had finally allowed myself to become entirely me. The night before I was to leave, Aunt Lila prepared a farewell dinner. The table glowed under soft candlelight, the silver rosebud necklace resting around my neck like a quiet promise. She wore a deep emerald dress, her hair pinned with the same effortless grace I had admired since childhood. We ate slowly, the conversation gentle, as if neither of us wanted to disturb the fragile magic of the moment. After dessert, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "You've always had this strength," she said softly. "All I did was help you see it." I swallowed against the sudden tightness in my throat. But what if I lose it when I leave? What if everything we built here just fades? Her eyes held mine with steady warmth. "Strength isn't something I can give or take. It's yours. The dresses, the rituals, the tea, they were only mirrors. You've already claimed what you needed. It will go with you wherever you choose to go." The next morning, the house seemed to breathe around me as I packed my suitcase. I carefully folded the midnight blue gown, the blush blouse, the silver necklace, tokens of a summer that had quietly reshaped me. When Aunt Lila appeared in the doorway, I felt an unexpected wave of gratitude and something deeper, something almost too vast for words. "You don't have to hide," she said, her voice a gentle whisper. "Not from them, not from anyone. Let them see you. The rest will follow." At the airport, as I waited for my parents, I caught my reflection in a polished glass window. The person looking back wore simple travel clothes, nothing dramatic or unusual, yet I could see the quiet confidence shining through. My posture held an ease I had never carried before, My eyes reflected a calm understanding of who I was and what I wanted. When my parents arrived, they hugged me tightly, their familiar warmth grounding me in the world I had left behind. They didn't comment on my appearance beyond the usual, "You've grown," but I noticed their eyes linger for a moment, curious and perhaps a little surprised by the quiet assurance in my smile. The drive home felt different than the one that had brought me to Aunt Lila's house. The roads were the same, the scenery unchanged, yet I no longer felt like a passenger in my own life. I thought of the dresses carefully folded in my suitcase, of the necklace resting against my skin, of the countless small choices that had led me here. Each memory carried a lesson, that transformation is not a single dramatic act, but a series of quiet decisions, each one revealing a truth we are brave enough to claim. Weeks later, I still sometimes catch the faint scent of lavender in unexpected places, a passing breeze, a freshly washed shirt, and I am transported back to that summer of gentle rituals and whispered encouragements. I wear the necklace when I need a reminder of the strength Aunt Lila helped me uncover, though I no longer need the mirror to prove it. People often ask if that summer changed me. The truth is more delicate than a simple yes. Didn't create someone new. It revealed someone who had always been waiting just beneath the surface, patient and unafraid. Aunt Lila's plan, if it could even be called a plan, was never about turning me into someone else. It was about guiding me toward a truth I had been too cautious to face. And now, as I move through the world with quiet confidence, I carry that truth with me. That identity is not a mask or a costume, but a garden waiting to bloom. All it needs is the courage to open, one petal at a time.